The President of the United States has just declared in no uncertain terms, we didn't just win, we kicked their ass.
And as we take decisive action to stop the threat posed by the terrorist regime in Iran with Operation Epic Fury. Is that a great name? Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
Their military capabilities virtually obliterated. Their supreme leader dead. Their navy at the bottom of the sea. And now Iran's own president is begging for a ceasefire. China's in full panic with gas lines stretching for miles, and the entire geopolitical order that Iran spent 40 years building is collapsing in real time. But here's what no one is telling you. What's emerging from the ashes of this war isn't just a military victory. It's the foundation of a brand new Middle East, one that can permanently end Iranian dominance, lock China out of the region, and deliver the most consequential geopolitical realignment since the fall of the Soviet Union. And it's all happening right now. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. President Trump was having more fun than a human should be allowed to have, as the good old Rush Limbaugh used to say. He was at a rally in Kentucky yesterday where he detailed the latest on the Iran war. He made it absolutely clear that we've won a stunning victory over Iran's nuclear and military capabilities, and even had a little fun with how he picked the name Epic Fury.
They gave me a list of names that, sir, you can pick the name you'd like, sir. I said, the name of what? The name of the attack on Iran, sir. And they gave me like 20 names, and I'm like falling asleep. I didn't like any of them. Then I see Epic Fury. I said, I like that name.
That's just so Trump. I mean, that's showmanship. And it's precisely why the legacy media hates him so much, because he's so confident, relentless. He's so taunting, and they hate it. They hate it. It's that goading. It's that ridicule constantly directed towards the woke left and the legacy media, revealing them to be the cultural clowns that they really are. That's what upsets them the most. But Trump has most certainly been declaring that we have won, telling CBS that the war is, quote, very complete, very much so, and that Iran has no navy, no communications, no air force, and multiple Pentagon briefings confirm Iran's navy and air defenses have been heavily degraded, if not completely obliterated. Analysts are emphasizing that some missile and drone capability does remain, and that it's too early to say Iran's military is like completely gone, that it's literally non-existent. But virtually every serious analyst recognizes that that obliteration is only a matter of time. It's not a matter of if. It's only when it becomes totally obliterated. And so that puts the latest Iranian call for a ceasefire in pretty accurate perspective. Iran's President Pezeshkian has publicly called for a ceasefire, and he's laid out three conditions. He wants the United States and Israel to first recognize Iran's, quote, legitimate rights. Second, he wants them to pay reparations for the damage inflicted. And then third, he wants guarantees that they'll never attack Iran again. Now, on the surface, that does sound defiant. Sounds like a regime digging in, but many are noticing that if you read between the lines there, this is the president of Iran, right? Not the supreme leader, not the IRGC, not the parliament speaker. This is the president, the pragmatist. Remember, the guy who apologized last week to the Gulf states while his own military kept firing missiles behind his back. He's the one floating ceasefire terms. And notice what's not in those conditions. He's not demanding that the United States withdraw from the region. He's not demanding Israel be destroyed. He's not invoking the revolutionary ideology of the Islamic Republic. He's asking for face-saving concessions, right? Reparations, recognition, guarantees, the very kind of diplomatic off-ramp that lets a defeated regime pretend it's negotiating from strength. Meanwhile, the IRGC is saying the exact opposite. Surprise, surprise. So the new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, who many believe is either incapacitated or dead, all we've seen of him is a cardboard cutout at this point. He has supposedly released a statement in writing, right? So he's being called the first auto pen supreme leader. But that statement has called for revenge for those killed in the war and that the Strait of Hormuz will remain shut and that they will continue to attack military bases throughout the region. So what we're seeing is a regime that is literally at war with itself. You've got the presidential faction groping for an exit, and you've got the IRGC faction vowing to fight to the death. And Bloomberg is now reporting that back-channel negotiations are indeed underway through European and Middle Eastern mediators. The problem for Iran is that their list of allies grows very, very thin. And it's not just every single Arab state turning against Iran. The GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council, is absolutely unanimous in its denunciation of the regime. They've collectively been hit harder than Israel by Iran's ballistic missile and drone retaliations. Now the nation of Thailand has officially summoned Iran's ambassador over the targeting of the Thai ship near the Strait of Hormuz the other day. Yesterday, we reported on 3 commercial vessels hit by Iranian projectiles in and near the Strait of Hormuz, and one of them was a Thai-registered bulk carrier. It caught fire after being struck, and 3 crew members, as I understand, are still unaccounted for. Thailand was neutral. They are now publicly denouncing the Iranian regime, and they are today being joined, if you can believe it, by none other than the People's Republic of China.
China does not agree with the attacks on Gulf states and condemns all indiscriminate attacks on civilians and non-military targets. The urgent task is to immediately cease military operations and prevent further expansion of the conflict. The solution lies in returning to dialogue and negotiation as soon as possible and striving to restore peace. The fundamental solution is to jointly return to the right track of abiding by international law and the basic norms of international relations.
Now, if you don't know, the conflict is turning out to be a disaster for China, as Trump has intended it to be. What you're looking at here are, massive gas lines with thousands of Chinese drivers lining up at gas stations to fill their tanks before major price increases go into effect. China gets 40% of their oil from the Strait of Hormuz. So any major interruption there is an economic disaster for the Chinese. So it's no wonder that China is coming out and pressuring Iran to end this thing now. And that's exactly what we should expect. To put it bluntly, Iran is of no use to China anymore. They're no longer a useful proxy. And that's because they can no longer project power. And they can no longer project power because they've been defanged. I don't know why I was thinking of this today. Do you remember the abominable snow monster in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Bumble, right? When he was defanged, that's when he suddenly became humble and compliant, amendable and cooperative, right? That's exactly what's happening to Iran, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. One of the key objectives of this military campaign has been to completely crush their ability to project power in the region. And when you can't project power, you're no longer feared. And oil tankers and commercial vessels and regional investors aren't going to give you the time of day anymore. China had invested hundreds of billions of dollars into strengthening Iran to serve as their regional proxy in the Middle East, at the single most important choke point for energy distribution on the planet, Hormuz. And now that proxy is gone. Gone. Iran is being completely defanged, and they've therefore lost any value whatsoever for China because they can't project power. Again, this is the kind of earth-shattering stuff you'll never get from the TDS-infected legacy media. And that's because what's presented as neutral reporting seeks to steer perception instead of surface all the facts. Millions are realizing that news is broken. But where do you turn then? Well, luckily, there's a solution that helps you see exactly what's being emphasized, ignored, or spun. Ground News pulls headlines from over 50,000 news sources and makes it easier to understand what's actually happening. You can see the political bias of each outlet, insights like reliability and outlet ownership, and how coverage breaks down across the spectrum. That's why over 1 million people have downloaded Ground News. Check it out for yourself at ground.news/Steve. Now, my personal favorite feature is the blind spot feed. It shows you which stories are blowing up on one side of the aisle but barely mentioned on the other. It's the clearest way to see media bias in action. So, for example, here's a story the left is completely ignoring, where the U.S. Supreme Court just unanimously smacked down lower courts for trying to interfere with President Trump's deportation efforts. It was a colossal loss for the left, and the legacy media has all but ignored it. Now, of course, right-wing media has its own blind spots, but now you'll know. Right? With every story, Ground News shows you the entire spectrum of who's reporting from left, right, and center, how reliable each source is, and who owns each outlet. It's everything the corporate press doesn't want you to see. Right now, you can get 40% off the Vantage plan, which gives you unlimited access to all the features that I personally use for about $5 a month. Just visit ground.news/Steve, click the link in the description, or scan the QR code. That's ground.news/Steve. One of the most astonishing developments in geopolitics today, it's actually more accurately referred to as theopolitics, is the rise of the Abraham Accords, the very architecture that promises to finally bring peace and prosperity to the Middle East. Signed in 2020, the Abraham Accords weren't just peace deals. They were a direct civilizational challenge to Iran's claim to lead the Muslim world. You see, every time an Arab state normalized with Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, whoever, it was a repudiation of Tehran's theopolitical authority as leader of the Islamic resistance against the United States and its regional proxy, Israel. And the supreme leader at the time, Ayatollah Khamenei, knew it. He declared that any Muslim state pursuing normalization with Israel was, quote, betting on a losing horse, and that Iran would decide which nations remained within the fold of Islam and which had surrendered their place. Now, what's so essential to get there is that this wasn't a foreign policy statement by Iranian officials. It was what we call a theopolitical decree. The supreme leader was asserting that Iran, as a constitutional theocracy, held the spiritual authority to basically excommunicate sovereign nations from the Islamic world. That is exactly the kind of claim that the Abraham Accords was designed to shatter. And so, October 7th was Iran's answer. When Saudi normalization with Israel got serious in 2023, Tehran activated Hamas. The massacre wasn't random violence. It was a theopolitical intervention designed to reignite the Palestinian cause, shame the normalizing states, and reassert Iran's role as the indispensable patron of Muslim resistance. And for a moment, it worked. The normalization talks froze. The divide between Israel and the Gulf states came roaring back. And Tehran appeared to have successfully positioned itself as the moral center of the Islamic world. But here's where the whole thing collapsed. Iran's self-proclaimed leadership conveniently left out the fact that they themselves had spent years attacking the very nations they now claim to lead. Houthi strikes on Saudi oil facilities back in 2019. Drone attacks on the UAE in 2022. The attempted destabilization of Bahrain back in 2011. Proxy threats against every Gulf capital. Iran destroyed the myth of Muslim solidarity with its own hands. But then they expected those same nations to rise up in its defense when the bombs started falling. Well, unfortunately for Iran, they didn't. In fact, the Gulf states just voted unanimously at the UN Security Council to condemn Iran. And now with the IRGC shattered, the supreme leader dead, Hezbollah broken, and the Houthis on the sidelines, the entire theopolitical architecture that Iran built over 4 decades is in ruins. And that is the opening. Analysts are noting that America now has a once-in-a-generation window to upgrade the Abraham Accords from diplomatic symbolism into an integrated security architecture, a permanent Israeli-Arab defense framework anchored by American sponsorship, connected to the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor, and designed to make Chinese and Iranian re-entry into the region prohibitively expensive. In theopolitical terms, Iran's claim to civilizational leadership in the Muslim world has literally been annihilated, not just militarily, but spiritually. And the Abraham Accords 2.0 is what rises in its place. A new regional order built not on revolutionary theology, but on shared security, shared prosperity, and the recognition that the Sunni Arab world's future lies with Israel and America, not against them. If you found this video helpful, you'll love Patriot Alerts, my free daily newsletter plus weekly rack-up. Check out the link below.